Welcome, listeners. So, before we dive into today's episode, I'd like to give you a bit of a quick rundown what will be coming up in this episode. So, our invited guest today is a very special one who has a vast experience and insight in application security. So, we will be talking about foundational tools of application security, how to choose them, fine tune, and make sure they actually help developer instead of slowing them down. So our invited guest will be sharing his experience on the tools like SCA, SAS, and secret scanning and bug bounty program. So how these factors factor in to bring into application security. So we will be covering up how a team can reduce the noise and focus on real security risk. Why AI and automation can be a real application security game changer. Uh, how the bug bounty program bridges the gap between security team and ethical hackers. So, if you have a security enthusiast or a developer, engineer, or anyone who's very interested in making AppSec seamless in their environment, this episode is actually for you. So, stick around, hit the like and subscribe button, and let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of Cyber GPT Pulse, the podcast where we delve into cyber world. I'm your host Amiruddin Sayyad, and today we will be we have a very exciting expert guest who will be discussing with us regarding essential tool and strategies of strengthening application security. For that, uh, joining us is Jeevan Singh. He's a director of product security at Rippling, which Rippling is, for those who don't know, is a very leading workforce management software company. And Jeevan brings his wealth of experience of application security, having successfully led various teams in various organizations, implemented robust AppSec tooling and strategy. So, Jeevan, welcome to the show, and great to have you. For those few who don't know you, do you want to share a bit of your own yourself and as well as your journey?
Yeah, I think you're overinflating how great I am. Thank you for saying that. Maybe tell my boss that as well. No, it's been great being in AppSec side. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years, a little bit over 20 years, a little bit 10, over 10 for the development side and about 10 on the application security side. So my origin story is that I really always had a fascination with the application security. So anytime a vulnerability test, like a pen test, would happen in our organization, I would take the pen testing results and tell my boss, "Don't worry about these. I'll fix all of these vulnerabilities." And over time, like I got more and more interested and fascinated by security. I started joining security conferences and meetups and learning a lot more. And then as I got more responsibilities on the software development side, I started leading a team, then multiple teams. I had less and less time to actually fix security vulnerabilities. So I like, you know what, let me teach people. So I started teaching people, my team, how to fix security vulnerabilities. Then I started teaching multiple teams. Then I felt like it was easier for me to just teach the organization how to deal with security vulnerabilities. And shortly after that, we hired a VP of security, and he's like, "Hey, why don't you join my team?" And I wasn't sure at that point. I'm like, I have a really strong development career. I have a path that I'm sort of forging there. Not sure if I want to join the security side. And it took me about a month to make the decision. And I finally joined. And on the first day, I realized I would never go back to software development. As much as I love software development, security is just so much more interesting and fascinating. So, very lucky at that first role. I got exposure to all different sorts of security domains, had to do incident response, corporate security, infrastructure security, product security. So, and which has helped me a lot more throughout my career as well. Just being able to taste all these little areas. I love application security the most. I'm sorry for the other domains, but application security has always been a lot of fun, which is why I like talking about that at a lot of places.
Well, thanks, this is Muhammad Ali joining as a co-host. Jeevan, like I feel like the year of application security is just around the corner. So, like, kind of like how cloud infrastructure took off. Maybe the pandemic pushed companies to accelerate their efforts, but I truly believe AppSec will have its moment soon. But then helping to bridge to skill gap and build a stronger community. So until then, so tools are crucial to empower AppSec professionals to get the job done, say efficiently. So like if you can shed some light on how how can we take this journey in the cyber in the field of AppSec.
Yeah, that's a great point. Like usually application security teams and just all security teams are quite lean, and we have to rely on tools to help us with finding vulnerabilities, making sure that there's no security misconfigurations and all of that. So when I think about security tooling, there are certain type of tools that I always, when I join an organization, I want to make sure that they're in a good place. So I have 5 foundational tools. I have SAST, so static analysis, so API security. Typically, we don't care about DAST these days. We a lot of the web applications that we build, they're all API first, so we focus on API security. SCA. Oh, I really care about our third-party libraries and if they have vulnerabilities in them. Secret scanning. Unfortunately, all companies, we leak secrets like crazy throughout the ecosystem. So having a tool there is really important. The last one I rely on is on bug bounty. I want to make sure that if those 4 didn't catch the vulnerabilities, and those 4 are good at catching certain type of vulnerabilities. Bug bounty is really good at finding business logic type of vulnerabilities. So having those 5 different tools in my ecosystem, it really helps me understand what classes of vulnerabilities there are and where I need to sort of focus my attention within the organization. So if I'm discovering a lot of third-party library vulnerabilities, I want to make sure that we build up processes and systems to make it easier for developers to choose the right third-party library itself, and making sure that they're not using a library that's only maintained by one person on the internet. Yeah, using those tools, it helps me sort of decide where I need to focus our energy.
Yes, Jeevan. So that's actually makes total sense. And regarding the third party library, it's kind of remind me when I joined in my company and kind of have a shaky security requirement documentation, and I created that and found a various issues which we have to deal with developers are not thinking rightly when they are looking for an add-on and just go on GitHub and find a good one just because it's working faster on very easier integration with their APIs. They are just happy to use it. So you have to just do some hand holding there and to make them understand why not to use it. So yeah, it's kind of a very interesting journey there. So sometimes these tools don't blend well with each other. So that's another issue which we have to make them uh, uh, make them understand. So let's talk about, you have discussed 5 different commandments, as you can also say. Uh, these commandments of tool set. So let's talk about SCA tool. Uh, how can team ensure they are effectively identifying vulnerabilities in the dependencies while keeping things aligned with the within the stack as well?
Yeah, great question. I do want to just talk. These are foundational tools, and then after you get those in place, I have other tools that I like to stack up on in itself.
Yeah.
So when it comes to SCA, I have a lot of criteria when I think about SCA. So before I do any, um, so a lot of the tools that we have, you can have open source version or you can have enterprise versions. I tend to go the enterprise versions because they build a lot of ecosystem around the tool itself, so it makes it easier for us to operate. I want to make sure that my product security engineers are not spending all their time maintaining these tools. They're spending time doing other things as well. So when looking at SCA, a lot of the current hype is around reachability, and that is extremely important in itself. We want to make sure that whenever we discover third-party library vulnerabilities, is actually reachable, and we're not actually giving engineering teams busy work. So if we don't know if a vulnerability is reachable, all of these criticals can actually potentially be critical. But if you actually do the proper reachability analysis, you'll find out maybe only 5% or even 3% of the vulnerabilities are actually reachable. So what we've discovered doing a POC earlier in my career is that it is about 3% at the organization I was working at the time that was reachable. So that's number one. Number two is that obviously the tools have to have a robust library where they can actually understand if the vulnerability exists. So if you're running Python in your organization, you should be able to handle Python type of scans, or Golang, or whatever your framework of choosing is. Always at every company that I am, I always look at cost as well. You have to make sure that the cost of the tool is reasonable and appropriate. There are some tools out there that are extremely expensive, mostly because of their name brand status. So it's funny because some of these name brand tools are not nearly as sophisticated or good as some of the new up and comer companies themselves. And one last thing I want to point out, you have to really understand how are you using the tool in your ecosystem. What's your workflow for getting these vulnerabilities resolved? If the workflow is around, we're going to be cutting Jira tickets. Whenever a vulnerability is discovered, we'll assign it to the appropriate engineering team and they'll fix it. Perfect. Make sure that the tooling has a capability with generating Jira tickets from the get-go. If the goal is we're going to pull in all the data, we'll create dashboards, and then engineering team will look at dashboards, then good. Make sure that the API support is really strong, and then you can pull the data wherever you want there. So a lot of different things. You make sure you have your strong rubric, your requirements for your organization on what exactly and how exactly you're going to use your tool, and then optimize for that in itself.
Right. Yeah, SaaS tools, let's be honest, they can get noisy. Like, I just would like to add one point to what you mentioned. Like prioritizing the issues based on risk. Maybe you need to have an approach that focuses on the risk of a vulnerability. So not just the number of alerts, but the SaaS tools often flag a tons of low priority issues. So, and while they may technically be vulnerabilities, aren't immediately exploitable. So, like for an instance, like a SQL injection vulnerability in a function that doesn't actually handle user input directly may not be a risk in your context, but the tool will still flag it. So in these cases, we may have to look at the exploitability of the issue. If an attacker can't easily exploit the vulnerability without an access vector, or it's not an urgent matter. So yeah, so it's all about the context and understanding how we configure the tool. It's a constant balancing act between the securing the application and not getting bogged down by every minor issue. So, and our next question. So, what's your advice for finding that sweet spot between useful insights and false positives?
Yeah, I think we're living in very interesting times, especially given the podcast name is GPT. There are now a lot of tools out there that are focusing more on the AI side of things. So you kept on mentioning context. Context matters. It matters a lot. And while it's hard for us humans to be able to understand all the context without investing a significant amount of time and energy into it, there are AI tools that do help with that. I'll come back to the AI tools. First, I'll talk about some of the traditional tools. You're right, Mohammed. Like the challenge with the traditional tools is the tuning that you have to do when it comes to SAST tools itself. They come up with their own rules, and it doesn't understand the context within the code itself. So you're right. Like this particular function might be susceptible to SQL injection checks, but there's never going to be user input. So that should not be a concern. But that usually means that you're spending months or quarters tuning the rules to get it to a good place so that it makes an impact. So there's a ridiculous amount of technical debt that you have to deal with when you're first enabling SaaS tools. So those are the legacy vendors that I think about. Then you have some of the more modern vendors where the amount of technical debt is not there. They have very flexible rules where it has understanding of the context in itself, and it's really easy to write very sophisticated rules to discover vulnerabilities. So I remember that one point in my career, at one company, we had a number of permission or authorization type of issues themselves. And particularly, we had 6 different classes. So as we were scanning the system to discover where it is in our system, we were able to generate these rules to make sure that we stop the bleeding. We know that if there were any more new issues that came out, we would block it, and then engineers would have to do the things the right way. We had all the information, provide them to them in the PRs themselves. Um, so those type of tools, the modern tools, they work great. Much lower false positive rates. You shouldn't have to feel as scared as implementing it in your CI/CD pipelines. And not only that, engineers are not afraid to use these tools as well. So I've been at companies where engineers were creating those custom rules, SAST rules, for their own purposes. They're doing it for their own linting purposes as well. They didn't want maybe you're migrating away from one system to another, and you want to make sure that you stop the old usage of the way that you did things in the past. So that those type of tools make things very sticky. So the third one is the future tools that we lightly touched upon. And what they do is they take in prompts. So that permission issues that I was talking about, it took us time to build those rules to find them in our ecosystem. But with the new tools, you should be able to prompt, and the AI agents, they understand the context. So they are able to sort of tell you what exactly you should be looking for and where you should be putting your focus there in itself. So we're definitely in a very interesting time where very shortly in the future, we are going to be able to leverage these AI tools that will help us with SaaS offerings. Again, earlier in my career, these legacy tools, they sucked up so much time. These AI tools, while they're not going to be perfect, they're going to be really reducing the amount of operational work your security teams need to do.
Yeah. So you actually covered a good point there, and I just want to add there. If so, although most of the major organizations have covered that bridge, but even today, in couple of organizations, specifically working with IoT and embedded system, as their code base is still a bit of legacy and using embedded C and Verilog and those not advanced languages. So dev want to depend on linters still. I still have those arguments in my company. So they don't want to depend on SAS and SCA findings because those offerings are not exactly directing to the major issue, and sometimes it's just a conflict between their own customized linter with the SE or SAST uh, uh, noise which they want to figure it out. So it's kind of a learning path which SAS and SE need to do with these IoT and embedded, as well as a couple of other legacy specification which need to be working out. And for that, as initially you have covered that AI tooling will also help, and specifically with AI, hyper parameterized tuning is what we do, and with the training set and the work which for generating any rule set human need to do, specifically tuning those to reduce noise, and further that is done by the hyperparameter tuning itself in the AI modeling. So it helps, and it's getting better. Still there is a lot of work to do, but I have some positive belief that in a couple of years we will see much better applicant security support from AI tooling. So the third foundational tool which you uh, uh, was talking about, let's focus on that. It's a kind of very cliche one. We are still talking about that's secret scanning, but still it's a hot topic. So what should a team prioritize to make sure these tools are effective and don't slow things down, specifically because secret scanning need to be scanned for the whole repo, and sometimes we have millions of records, and it can take a lot of time. I'm asking because I've seen this with our limited resource constrained IoT tools and IoT environment where we are scanning some, it's not much, it's 50 MB file or repo, but in the connection, it can get very messy uh, to make any real time monitoring for that.
Yeah, great point for sure. When it comes to secret scanning, again, you can always go open source or enterprise route itself. Open source, always great if you're limited on funding. It's good to scan and understand the type of secrets that are leaking. I prefer the enterprise, mostly because a lot of these enterprise offerings, what they do is they help you prioritize what's important. Um, and what they do is that once a secret is discovered, whatever secret key format it is, it will a lot of these tools will actually check to see if that secret is live itself. And if it's live, then you know that you've leaked a pretty potentially a dangerous secrets itself, and you can have a deeper look at it there. So I much prefer that over an open source tool where like you have to validate yourself. I'd rather have the tool tell me, hey, it is a live secret or not a live secret. So that's one of the things. The other thing is that it depends on how deep you want to get into your ecosystem. Whenever we talk about leak secrets, the first thing that comes to our mind is the code base. That's where we leak most of our secrets. But unfortunately, that's not where only we leak our secrets. I've been at companies where we leak secrets in our Confluence or Jira or our Slack. So you can look at all these different places where we leak secrets. Our current tool that we're using at Rippling, we also look at our Google Drive to see if there's any secrets there. Our CI/CD tooling. We can look at S3 buckets as well to make sure that we're scanning all these places. So it's really important that you get tools that, again, understanding your ecosystem and where you need to find these secrets, and then making sure that you get tools that actually can tell you if there's a live or a not live secret. At a previous company, when we ran our scan across the ecosystem, we discovered over 1 million potential leak secrets. So, um, so you have to literally go through all the findings to better understand if it's a legitimate finding or if it's just a false positive. When you have tools that actually validate your secrets, that 1 million leaked secrets can potentially be 800 actual live secrets. So you want to make sure that you are using tools to actually save your engineers time, and that they can focus on the most important things.
Yeah, that's pretty much good point there. And specifically for the secret detection, although we have security practices and controls in place to not have these secret hard coded, but even then, I have seen in some organization, past organization, there was a request came from dev team that this is just a testing private repo, and we need to allow hard coded secret in this. So yeah, you can just
I don't
understand
think
this.
I think all orgs are the same. All the developers are the same. There'll be certain types, and you sort of have to talk to them. Well, what are best practices? Should we have test secrets in our ecosystem, or should we make sure that we put them in the right places and you have pointers to where it should be going? And literally every company that I go, I have that same conversation. It really depends on my prioritization list of where I have to fight engineering on that particular matter.
Yeah, you have to just limit your bandwidth on these fights, and yeah, focus on the critical one. So of course, because of these various fights and requirements, we cannot and no organization can have that bandwidth to scan or cover all the aspects of a secret as well as other security tooling. So bug bounty program is one which is a great way to collaborate the hacking community, ethical hacking community, and get something out of it. And it's kind of helps into pushing a couple of stuffs it's in your organization itself. So uh, yeah, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I love bug bounty. I first got exposed to bug bounty in about 2015. What had happened was that we ran a pen test, and the pen test organization came back and said, "Hey, we had zero findings." And we're like, "This seems kind of strange because um, there's never zero findings." And we were pretty aggressive with them and saying, "Hey, we're not paying for this pen test. We know that there are findings. We know that because we know how many discoveries that we have in the past. So they did a retest. They had 30 plus findings. So clearly, something was off. And at that point, we are like, you know what? Let's explore this bug bounty, a new thing that's called bug bounty. And it was different. It was new, but we had all these security researchers looking for vulnerabilities. And over the course of the next decade, bug bounty has been one of my core tools that I rely upon. So when we talk about SAST, SCA, API security, the secret scanning, they are all able to do one thing very well. But the thing that they can't do is find business logic vulnerabilities. You really need the human mind to find those sort of vulnerabilities, which is why I rely a lot on bug bounty itself. So, uh, first thing that I typically do when I join a company, I have a look at their bug bounty findings. If there isn't a much, then what I do is I spend the first quarter really investing my time spending looking at building up our bug bounty program because it gives me a sense of what attackers, what our threat actors will look at when they're accessing our system. And it gives me great signal on where I need to invest my time as well. So earlier we talked about permissions. At one company that I was at, noticed a lot of permission issues. We discovered there are multiple classes of permission issues, and we were able to align the engineering team to start mitigating those permission issues. And it was looking good. Like after a quarter, the volume of findings have dropped. We still have permission issues, but there are different classes of permission issues at that time. But we reduced findings by about 3x from the um, initial runs. But establishing a bug bounty is not easy. Those tools are much easier to establish. Tools, you point it at a repo, you set up your rules, and you're good to go. With respect to bug bounty, there's a human element. There's a human on the other side that is trying to find vulnerabilities, and you have to build your community. You have to make sure that researchers want to spend time on your program. You have to reward them. But not only do you have to reward them, you also have to show that their contributions are valuable. So you want to make sure that you're triaging their findings very quickly, but you're also fixing issues very quickly. It's very rewarding to a bug bounty researcher when you fix their issues in a very short time span. You show them that, yeah, the effort that you put in was actually worth it. So finding those researchers that can discover critical and high vulnerabilities are hard, and try to keep them on your program is even harder. So you have to find unique ways, make sure that you're working really closely with them, make sure that they know that you care about them, make sure that you are able to communicate well with them just in general. And what I've done is with some of our really, really strong researchers, we will enable beta features on their tenants. So they let them know, hey, new feature coming out. Um, it's just fresh off the presses. Do you mind have a look at this and dive deeper into it? So our top researchers will get a kick at it, and then it gives me a peace of mind that hey, the things that we're pushing out, they have been security hardened. Someone's actually had a look at it in itself. Other things that I would do is I'd be very honest and transparent with researchers. Like if we did evaluate a vulnerability and we don't think the priority is correct, I'll write why and how we thought about the logic on our end. And for the most part, I'd actually continue to reward them at a higher rate, just letting them know that, hey, your contributions are very valued. I'm going to give you the full amount for the research, but future ones will be at a lesser amount, just because that particular area or that particular finding isn't as important for us. So we help calibrate them so that they're thinking about things very well. And lastly, if you have the opportunity, definitely meet some of these researchers in person. So I've been lucky enough to be able to do that. I've taken them out for lunches. So it's always nice to talk to them and just see the human behind all those crazy findings that you're paying a lot of money to find.
Right. Bug bounty programs can be real game changers, as you mentioned, for organizations. So, as when they are done right, so with a clear scope, transparent communication, and rewards. Actually, the most important thing that you. But that's a good point. So that actually motivate researchers. So they do become a key part of security ecosystem. But then think about it, like bug bounty hunters are out there hunting for those tricky vulnerabilities. Like that automate tools often miss like that one bug that hides in a plain sight which you can't see, like in a blindsided. So only to pop up when you least expect it. So but there are things like bug bounty program should never exist in isolation. So it needs to complement the organization's overall security strategy and as well as a great sidekick as a superhero. And as you mentioned, Jeevan, so taking a pen test, like, for example, as you mentioned, like, imagining a company like you hired, which came back with zero scan, like, pen tester to scan with zero vulnerabilities and zero findings. For me, it felt like watching a suspense movie where nothing actually happens. So it's a complete plot twist, honestly, but not in a good way. So no vulnerabilities at all. So it's like something's wrong. So that's like a chef telling you, "I made this amazing meal, and there were no burned edges and no overcooked food, but just the perfect dish. But this is something really not possible. Of course not. So there's always something that needs a little fixing. So I don't know how organizations design a bug bounty program that doesn't just sit there like an empty plate. So shifting gears a bit here. So with that in mind, so how do you think the organizations can design these programs to truly enhance their security strategy rather than just checking the box?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. The integrating tools is not the important part. That's the beginning of the journey. The most important part is when vulnerabilities are remediated. That's when the impact actually lands. And getting vulnerabilities fixed is not easy in itself. So there's a few things that I like to do. One is like I have a crawl, walk, run methodology when it comes with this. So crawling, make sure that you're integrating your tool. So say if you're integrating SaaS, maybe SCA, you've integrated and put it into all of your repos itself, which is not an easy task, but getting it everywhere. You want to be able to get all of the insights centralized. So if that means getting exports from the tool or hitting the APIs, you want to centralize all of the security tooling data. And then you want to be able to build dashboards for it. So you can do an analysis on that. That's usually what my crawl is. Walk for me is that I'm auto generating tickets and I'm auto closing tickets. So I want to make sure that any new vulnerabilities that are coming up, engineering is aware and fixing them. And then also once they fix them, I don't want our team to be involved. I want it to auto close when things are remediated. Run is I actually gate the mechanism. I want to make sure that anything that is critical high, we're not introducing into the ecosystem. We prevent critical and high vulnerabilities to being introduced. And the last one, sometimes I do a sprint. Sprint is being able to auto patch. So you just completely remove a development. You have to have a lot of good testing available so that it will catch any problems with the auto patching. But I want to make sure that you do a crawl, a walk, a run, and a sprint. You have to be iterative with your program for all these tools. You cannot go in and say, okay, I've discovered 40,000 vulnerabilities. Let me drop it on to the engineering team. If you drop 40,000 vulnerabilities, they're not going to fix them. You want to make sure that you're dripping vulnerabilities in. And what I like to say is that you have to make sure that you're building security muscle within your development organization. So if you have 40,000 vulnerabilities, maybe you put in your top 400 vulnerabilities. Make sure that you understand how long it took them to work on this, how long it took them to patch, and then you slowly start adding more and more and more until you get to a good place in itself. So you want to make sure you're dripping things in. And then people always ask, why don't you stop the bleeding first? Why don't you put the gating and then you do the ticketing afterwards? It's all about building that muscle. Once you've built the muscle, patching muscle, or fixing vulnerability muscle, then I like to put in the gating so that we stop the bleeding. But I want to always strengthen the engineering team. They have to, at a lot of companies, they haven't done too much security work. You want to slowly build that up at these organizations so that they're used to doing security work. And then you slowly add more and more security work for them to do. The goalpost should always be shifting. They shouldn't be standing still. You always say that, okay, I only care about the most critical vulnerabilities. Now I care about all critical vulnerabilities. Now I care about the most high vulnerabilities. Now I care about all high vulnerabilities. You always want to shift the goalpost to make sure that you are able to deliver the program in a way that's sustainable.
So yeah, that's a really good breakdown of how to do this, how to do it. Uh, Quite helpful for those teams who are really working on integrated dashboard and try to handle it, the stuffs and the fixing muscle which you talk about is most of the people will correlate it with security champion, and having those security champion in team is a very easy to say task, but implementing it in real life it's very difficult to find one interested guy, and uh, the amount of time they have to indulge it. uh, the PMs are not that helpful sometime. In couple of teams we don't have the
Yeah,
resources bandwidth, so
you
yeah,
bring up
it's
Yeah,
it's
you bring up a great point. Security champions is a bottoms up approach to
yeah,
security. You need
Right.
both the bottoms up and you also need a top down.
yep,
You need to make sure that there's top down pressure that the VPs, the directors are putting on their
yep.
engineering teams. And then you know that security is important. You have to do it. But you also want to bring a bottom up. You want people to be excited about security and they want to be fixing these security things. So both of them is it's important to as a part of your holistic program.
Yep. So that's been a very critical point to have the learning approach in your bottom up system, and to have the training appropriate training abstract training program, and to make the developers and PM to understand why it is functionality is very critical to cover in security controls, and that is one of the thing which really help to have to also sort of handle those frictions between developers. So what all you think that how what all the other ideas are there, how the teams can balance the need of robust security without disrupting developer workflow?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with prioritization. Um, Developers typically don't have autonomy over their backlog. They have a lot of people talking to them. They have product management to saying, "Hey, I need you to build a product, new features, new features, new features." Then you have potentially your DevX team saying, "Hey, we're doing these migrations. We built these new tools. We need you to shift away from how you're accessing these systems to the new way of accessing these systems." Then you might even have customers saying, "Hey, there's a bunch of these defects in your system. We need you to address these defects." So it's a really hard balance, and I usually don't rely much on the developers for that because they don't have the autonomy. They have tens, dozens of people always bugging them about prioritization. I really like working at the VP or CTO level and saying, "Hey, these are all the things that I'm concerned with." And I usually like to bring out a lot of metrics themselves. We have a bunch of different metrics on security vulnerabilities. So a find versus fix ratio. Are we finding a lot more vulnerabilities than we were fixing? And if so, why? Why are we not fixing nearly enough? I also like to understand how many vulnerability fixes are per capita. So in the past year, how many vulnerabilities has this engineering part of the engineering org fixed? If it's less than one vulnerability fix per engineer, I know I can push a lot more vulnerabilities onto their plate in itself. We also calculate a security technical debt metric as well. We want to make sure that you are, while it's always important to fix the critical vulnerabilities, if this medium vulnerability has been open for 3, 4 years, maybe it's time for us to address those as well. There's a way for us to accumulate technical debt and want to make sure that we're addressing those. So with all of these metrics, I do like going to the VPs, SVPs, and the CTO, just letting them know that, okay, this is how we are observing and understanding the security posture of your organization. This is my goals for you. We want to make sure that we are reducing our total security technical debt. We want to make sure that we're fixing the appropriate amount of vulnerabilities on a given quarter. In order for us to do this, these are the goals or the OKRs, or this is how much bandwidth I need from your organization. So that's worked quite effectively. I know that I've worked with great VPs in the past where they're like, yep, we're going to allocate this much time to address security issues. Had a great partnership here at Rippling where one of our VPs, he preemptively, he's like, yep, we're spending about 25% of our time to address these security vulnerabilities. And at the end of the quarter, he had the hugest drop in total security technical debt. It was amazing to see. I always love it when I love it when our engineering partners are proactive and they care. They care deeply about vulnerabilities themselves. So the balance that you have to establish is understanding the organization's risk appetite, working with your security leadership to make sure that you're aligned, make sure that um, security is part of their quarterly objectives, and then following through, making sure that you're producing reports and metrics so that they know if they're falling behind on their goals.
Yeah, that's the classic, like, the find versus fix dilemma. So it's like trying to decide whether to just patch a small hole or your ship totally overhaul the entire vessel, though. So I certainly understand, like, as our organizations grow and the threat landscape continues to evolve, so sometimes faster, and then we can say zero-day exploit. So, but security teams must consistently reassess and upgrade their tooling. It's not just about staying afloat. It's about sailing smoothly through the storm. So knowing when to shift gears and improve your ship to handle bigger waves. That's completely you like you covered, Jeevan. It's a but then so here is the fun part. Like shifting a little bit gears again here to your security tooling point or tooling on point. So how can teams make sure like they're always on one step ahead of potential threats? Like what should they be considering to constantly refine their tools and practices, or else like risks? So
Yeah, that's $1 million question. So, I think like understanding and having a great security hygiene helps. It helps greatly. So, a great example of that would be Log4j, Log4Shell that came out many years ago. It ruined all of our lives for at least a month itself. And the top security teams, they weren't even worried about it. They knew that as Log4j gets patched up, they're going to be pushing all of their products and just pushing it to production. So these organizations, they're very sophisticated where every time you push to production, they have this suite of tests that will know that if they are upgrading libraries or any apps or anything, it will automatically flag it. So they had zero concern. They're like, you know what, patch it all up and we'll see what will happen. The less sophisticated companies were scrambling. They were looking for where is Log4j even in my ecosystem? Where can I find it? And I know that we had a challenge as well when I was going through it, which which has why I really care about centralizing security tooling data just in general. So making sure if you have all of your data in a good place, it's really easy for you to understand where these potential attackers were, how to deal with the 0 days themselves. So it's really about understanding what you have and making sure that your knowledge of your systems is quite robust, and being able to be nimble enough to react when anything that happens. I know that we can't have tabletop exercises every month to see how we can deal with these sort of things, but running it once a quarter to better understand if something were to drop, how do we respond to it? So just being prepared for when this inevitability will come again. So it's been a few years. We'll knock on wood that we don't have another log4j anytime soon. But every several 5 years, there's something big that happens that forces all of us to reduce our sleep so that we can get things patched.
Yep, of
Um,
course. So specifically for Log4j, many of the teams were relying on asset management tools, and later on they found that yeah, it's not that helpful. And specifically after that, SBOM and other mandates coming on, but still I see organizations are still working toward it. They are not close to what should be achieved. So if anything related to that happen, so yeah, security teams will be very in shambles in those companies. So yeah,
Yeah,
specifically,
I
I totally
remember
understand that.
some tools that if the data was in their clouds, um, during Log4 Shell, they were unavailable because everyone was trying to access it. They were getting denied service on their end. So that was a lot of fun time at that point.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
disaster. So I was working with one of a DRP team, and I suggested that we have to also think about asset management and these tools, DRP planning, because we might be handling those issues when something happen and people are requesting. So that limit request need to be upgraded with any ticket itself. And yeah, those are really fun times when it happens. It actually help you understand your system and your environment even better. So that's a wrap up for today's discussion. And so let's move on. Before we close, let's move on to show our viewers a bit of non-technical side of Jeevan Singh. So what do you do when you are not working on product security or helping teams to implement AppSec program? So yeah,
Yeah,
care to share anything?
great question. So a few things. One is that I'm heavily involved in the community, AppSec community in itself. So I do a lot of volunteer work for OWASP Vancouver. So I help set up those meetups. I want The goal is for us to have fresh new faces with great new ideas. Some of us were now, I'm an old dinosaur. I need new people, new energy, new blood in our ecosystem, like both of you. Fresh look at these problems. We also, as part of OWASP, our Pacific Northwest chapter. Portland, Seattle, Victoria, and Vancouver, we got together and like we need a conference in our area as well. So last few years, we've during the COVID times, it was obviously virtual, but after COVID, we had it in Portland. Last year was in Vancouver. This year it's going to be in Seattle. So I really enjoy making sure that we are distilling the knowledge, AppSec knowledge, throughout the community itself. So spend a lot of time with that. I love playing basketball. I've been a fan for way too long. Huge fan of the Knicks. So Mohammed, whenever you get a chance, definitely go to
sure,
MSG, catch a Knicks game there.
definitely,
Yeah,
definitely.
and then the rest of the time is kids. I have two young boys. Spending time with them, making sure that they are enjoying their activities, and then yeah, just making sure that we have great family time.
Yeah, baby. Next week, I might end up going to MSG because Russell Peter, a great comedian, is going to show up there. So I have plans in place, but I'm not sure how far that's going to work. But let's see. So yeah, so like, hey, huge thanks to you, Jeevan, for sharing such valuable insights today. And again, like if you like viewers, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the site GBT Pulse and stay tuned for more expert conversations. Until next time, stay secure and keep the things firewall strong.